that draft document back to you in March, and then we'll get some formal board action on putting the team in place.
Right.
Okay? Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. I'm going to start off this concern about the 5-year budget projection. I wish Dr. Kelly was here because I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he's quite concerned that his remarks at the January 28th meeting were misconstrued. In no way was he trying to imply that a mistake had been made in the 5-year projections. In fact, we did go back and look at the tape, and his exact words, I believe, were that there was a perception that a mistake had been made on the part of some people. Having said that, I will tell you personally that I don't feel there's any mistake out there at all. I view the 5-year budget projection as just that. It's an exercise. It was originally intended to be an in-house exercise to give us some sense of where we're going in terms of present trends continuing. Just as an aside, I looked up the definition of the word projection, and it reads, a projection is an estimate or a forecast of a future situation or trend based on a study of present ones. So the 5-year projection as it sits right now, very, very conservative on the revenue side, assumes that the index will not increase beyond the 2.1, which is probably unrealistic. It does not factor in the exceptions that we're eligible for, nor does it factor in some of the fluctuations we're seeing in state budget numbers. On the expense side, I feel very comfortable that the assumptions used were reasonable. I think it's not necessarily the worst case scenario of what might happen, but it's certainly very conservative as well. If you go back and you look at the fund balance projections over the past couple of years, you will see that the projections for both 13 and 14 called for a deficit situation. And yet, when we got to that point in time, the budgets that we were able to offer you as an administration were balanced with no tax increase. So I'm very concerned about the contention that we somehow need to address a budget projection that may or may not happen 3 and 4 years out there. I view it more as this is potentially what could happen, and it's going to be our job as an administration and in cooperation with the board to make sure as those budget years come up and we're actually budgeting for them that we realistically look at what we need to do to keep that budget in balance, either within the index or below. And that's all I have to say.
Okay. I appreciate the historical context as well, because I've seen these forecast documents in past, at least the last 2 years, I believe, on this committee, and I seem to recall that that is what would happen if we had relied strictly on the forecast we issued 2 years ago, we would be in a deficit situation now, which we're not.
Yes, and Dr. Kelly cited the fact that, a year ago we were looking at a potential deficit in the budget for 14-15 of about $1.5 billion. That did not manifest itself because of the very limited and defined use of fund balance, and I would also like to discuss that because we do have a fund balance policy in place, and it's designed to limit our ability to use those funds for non-recurring expenses, except in very limited circumstances, such as the retirement escrow fund. That was specifically money put aside for purposes of cushioning the impact of the PSERS increases. And that's what we're using it for. We've also, as administration, been charged by several boards over the years of spending down that money by 17-18. And those numbers are in place, and indeed that's what we use to formulate the 14-15 budget. And as a result, we were able to bring you a no tax increase budget for 14-15. And I think that speaks volumes for the planning that goes on a continuing basis.
I think it does as well. Any committee questions?
Susan, you turned your mic on.
Oh.
That's off.
All right. Okay, so not a mistake. That's, I think, encouraging news, and I think that was merited saying. It's a projection, and projections are what they are. You're dealing with imperfect information. You are an uncertain future, but you're making some reasonable assumptions, and you're doing the best you can with the information that's presently at your fingertips in order to do this. So I guess my question is, we as a district do need to be engaged in longer-term planning because we've got longer-term issues that are before us. We know, for example, about a bubble in students at the high school, which is going to have to be dealt with at some time in advance of their showing up for ninth grade. The philosophy of, well, maybe we get it right, maybe we get it wrong, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe we didn't do so well the last time. I understand all that. Those are all caveats, but what is the alternative to projecting reasonably into the future and trying to understand where we need to be financially? I mean, we've got, according to these numbers, the $18 million cumulative deficit over the upcoming 5 years. That is a very significant number that we ought to be dealing with now. Whether it's the exact number, it's the best we can do right now, and it's got implications for a whole host of other things that are on the table ahead of us. So how are we going to address that? I mean, I think the disconnect here is in putting out a set of numbers and then walking away from them as if for somehow they're not useful at all, when in fact I think they're very useful for framing a discussion around some important things that we have to be able to talk about. We're talking about various options for capital improvements at the elementary schools as a consequence of full-day kindergarten. We've got this issue at the high school. There are other things hanging out there. What are we supposed to use to help cope with those questions, given where we're sitting right now, if not this?
Well, there's a lot of questions in what you just said, but just to capture on one of them, you know that we've taken great pains to categorize our fund balance into various assignments. I personally, and I think the administration, I can speak for them, feel very comfortable that the dollars are in place to fund the capital portion of what we need to do with our buildings over the next several years, not only our buildings, but our other facilities as well, without really impacting on the operating budget. And there needs to be a differentiation between the operating budget and the capital budget. And I think we've done a very good job in trying to separate that out. We've created the technology fund, we've created and enhanced the capital and the capital projects fund, and all of those are designed to, along with fund balance assignments, put things in their right category. So I guess I don't share the sense of urgency that a supposed cumulative fund balance of $18 million, which was done as an exercise, would manifest itself over the course of the next 5 years. It's our job to make sure that we're proactive with each individual budget as it comes to fruition to make sure that doesn't happen. Will it sometimes involve painful decisions? Maybe. I think that, one of the board goals has been that we will keep our expenditures budget to actual within a 3% margin, and we've done that. The projection for this year shows we should finish at about between 1 and 1.5%. That's phenomenal. And I don't take the credit for that. I think that, we've worked together as a team to make that happen. If we don't need to spend the money, we don't. If we need to reprogram, we do, but always with an eye on the bottom line. I tell people the budget is only good as the revenue you have to back it up. Okay? It's our job, if the revenues aren't collected, let's say we have a very bad year for tax collection. we haven't experienced that, but let's say we do. Then we need at mid-year to reanalyze where we are, because the revenues obviously are not there to back it up. So decisions would have to be made at that point. Can you foresee that? Maybe to some degree, but nobody has a true crystal ball on this.
I mean, and I understand there is no true crystal ball. The point is not about the crystal ball, but the point is that we do have some foreseeable issues that ought to be discussed. And when we're making decisions today or this year or in this budget year or the upcoming budget year that have implications over the next 5 years with regard to how we're stacking expenses and so on, we need to be talking about those, because what we do today matters 2 years from now. And I guess I don't think it's okay to say, oh, well, we're dealing a budget at a time, and so we're going to just forge ahead because right now we can do this, this, and this, and we can have a 0% tax increase, knowing full well that 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road, the situation is going to look extremely different. And I think at that point, the public and everyone who pays taxes in Radnor Township, as well as every employee and child in our district, would have a right to go back to this board and go, what were you thinking?
I agree with you, with the one major caveat that the operating budget would need to be looked at very long and hard if those situations develop. In other words, there's a differentiation between falling back on fund balance to fund operations. That definitely is a formula for disaster, because those are non-recurring revenues. Some would argue that in our case they've recurred, but we've got a handle on that and we're bringing that down. We've heard you loud and clear that that's a concern, namely that we have overtaxed the public over the course of 5+ years, and we have adjusted that over the last 2 years. It's been a multi-year approach to address that and come to grips with it. You yourself made the amendment last year to cut the millage even further. The board decided not to go that far, but you did do a slight tax decrease. We debated as administration whether to come in and recommend that we restore that millage to what it had been the prior year, and we decided that we could present you with a budget that was balanced, knowing that you're making the commitment and you still have the option of raising taxes within the scope of the index should something manifest itself between now and May that you feel is a legitimate reason to be so, i.e. funding a part of the PSERS to provide more of a cushion, that sort of thing. That has to be a board-level discussion. From my perspective, we as an administration have given you a budget. It's a sound budget, and it's designed to keep all programs in place, plus add the full-day kindergarten initiative at no increase in the real estate millage. And I feel confident that we've done that.
Tim, thank you. If I were a startup company looking for a bunch of investors, and I did my 5-year projection, I guarantee you my 5-year projection would be looking like I had top sales years every year and kept every cost in line, because I'm looking for the rosiest picture out there as I'm searching for investors in my venture capital company, or for venture capital. And likewise, a school budget that by law has to be balanced, 5-year projection, you have to be, as you said, very conservative, probably on just about every component that there is, healthcare, expenses, revenue. I'm not going to go into all the details, but I guess I come to the table implicitly trusting that A, you know what you're doing, and B, you have our best interests at heart, and that 5-year projection. I'm looking out there at the end of the room to Mr. Webster, and there's the 5-year projection. And it's your job, and it's Dr. Kelly's job, and it's our job as a board to vote to make sure that the boat stays on course, and isn't veering off toward what would be the worst-case scenario, nor do we want a situation, whereas where we're consistently having massive, massive surpluses.
Well,
Now,
not to interrupt you, but just an interesting aside. You mentioned if you were in venture capital that you would never put a projection out like this. That's one of the dangers, if that's the right word, maybe that's too strong of a word, but that's one of the dangers of making that kind of a projection public. For instance, the last bond issue we did, as you know, we get rated by Moody's. Moody's, of course, did their due diligence. They went out on their website. They found last year's 5-year budget projection and were quite concerned about the fact that we were showing a deficit situation over the upcoming years. And I spent a good deal of time talking about that and the rationalization behind it. And at the end, they were satisfied, to give us the rating they did, which, as you recall, was capital A double. So,
Right.
They're the ones who really matter in terms of that bond rating.
Right. No, I understand that. And so I guess I come to the table both kind of implicitly trusting you and the work you're doing, knowing that you have our best interests at heart, but also appreciating and agreeing with Susan that we need to be looking at some long-term things. But I feel like we kind of are. We just had a bond, we're talking about a bond refinancing, which is going to save us money down the road. That is a benefit for long-term planning. That is exactly why we're doing that type of thing. We will be mindful of these projections every time our labor negotiations come up to pass. We just had a very long presentation, and I look forward to hearing more of the finances about the impacts of the Affordable Care Act. So I think that we are doing those things, Susan, and, maybe in your world, we would be doing much, much, much more of that or more consistently, and I appreciate that. But I do think that we are being mindful of those things, and I would continue to look at Dr. Kelly and Tim and say, yeah, make sure that we don't actually start veering in that direction, that in the far-off future, if all of the worst-case scenarios of revenue and all the worst-case scenarios of expenses really do look like we're headed in that direction, you got to tell us. That's your job. So anyway, I'm comfortable with it. Thank you.
Okay, we don't need to make a decision on this tonight. You don't need direction specifically, and I don't want to be disrespectful of the concern that has been raised about this, but I also want to be respectful of the time of our Facilities Committee.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, we're going to have to suspend our discussion of this for now, not that we wouldn't return to it at some future time. I'm happy to entertain a quick period of public comment, again, with the understanding that some of this is going to be a continuing dialogue.
Thank you, Mr. Zajac. I know you could have made a different decision there, and I appreciate you not making a different decision. I will try and be respectful of how far over we are. I'm just very concerned about some of the things that I'm hearing here right now. This is something that we should all be in complete and total agreement on. If we have a problem, we have to recognize the problem. If we put out a budget that has $18 million of deficits and we don't think that's realistic, we shouldn't put out a projection that has $18 million of deficits. We should have a description of what the assumptions are that go into that projection so that everybody can make a decision. Are they aggressive or are they conservative? I went through, I added, as you know, if you've taken a look at my 5-year projection, I added percentage changes from year to year, which were not shown on the administration's budget. And taxes are going up by 2.8% per year. Most other revenues look like they're going up around 2% per year. Most expenses, other than health care and PSERS, are going up about 2.5% per year. All that stuff seems fairly reasonable to me. We have to understand we can't look at just year by year and hope that things work out. This is an unusual year, and maybe we'll save another $1 million in interest expense next year. That'd be great. That cuts the $2 million deficits to $1 million, and then it grows from there. But to stick our heads in the sand, and Susan, you're a financial person, I just wish you, I can't believe that you said that he'll keep us on course here, because if we don't have charts that are accurate, we can't stay on course. If we don't have a compass that's properly balanced, we can't stay on course. And I hear that this projection is that we're very comfortable that the assumptions we're using are reasonable, and then I hear they're very conservative as well. And that's an issue that we've been having year after year here in terms of the surplus discussion. Do we want to be conservative or do we want to be realistic? We're being very, very conservative on the revenue side. We should all agree on this. We can only raise taxes so much if we get in a bind here. And yes, we can go and cut services, like you said, Mr. Vail, and make some painful decisions. I don't think anybody wants to do that, especially when you have the opportunity here to look ahead into the future. Agree on what projections are reasonable, the most realistic case, and then plan ahead for that. My analysis shows that, yes, you're going to spend down the $10 million you have saved for capital projects to $1 million over 5 years. Is that okay? Well, you have $10 million and you're going to spend $15 million, you're going to put $5 million more in there, so you'll have $15 million to spend and you'll be down to $1. Okay, for those that don't want a lot of money in the fund, that's good. Is that where the board wants to be? There's no taxing for that. And if you want to raise taxes further, you're going to have a really hard problem doing it. So you just have to look at this. Again, there's no reason. This isn't political. This is just reasonable management of the organization. So I hope you'll all see that and not just cross your fingers and hope everything works out next year and then the year after that. We have an opportunity here to address this issue. If there's not an issue, let's be realistic and say there's not an issue, but let's get some realistic assumptions on the table so that we can make that decision.
Patty Booker. Comments, public versus private. For me, listening to this comment, and I'm really glad that I got here in time to hear it, concerns me because it's the real difference between public versus private-run organizations. We're an $85 million entity, and we should be planning as such. Proactive versus reactive, other two words that come up. Proactive is when you have a tool that can look several years out and you can plan against it. Reactive is per what Mr. Vail brought up, which is wait until we have a concern and start finding ways to cut the budget. That, for me, is not good planning and not good governance. Conservative versus aggressive. I agree with Mr. Webster, like to understand what about the projection. I'd like to understand the caveats in the projection. What is conservative? What is aggressive? And so that we can use it as a tool, because otherwise, why do we have it? For me, we need at least a 3-year plan that we feel holds some merit. I know you can't look. We're not expecting a crystal ball. We really aren't. And I know that you're doing a great job of finding revenues when we need to find revenues and getting every dollar for the district that we can possibly get. And you are doing a great job with that. But we do need a tool that we can use to plan multiple years. If 5 years is too far out and unpredictable, is 1 year predictable? This time next year, is what you've got in that 5-year projection predictable for next year? Is it predictable for the year after that? In my mind, it needs to be at least 2 to 3 years where we feel like it gets pretty close to what we can expect. We don't, as a school district, really bring in revenue, a large amount of revenue from any government entity other than our taxpayers. And so we need to be able to kind of plan around that. I realize that the state budgets change and we can't control that. But we can make some pretty good predictions on what Radnor's going to get, and I think we should plan that in. In terms of the bond rating, I appreciate that was brought up because I do think that is important, but at least my perspective, having sat on the Finance Committee at the time we talked about the bond rating, it was more about our taxing authority ability, not so much what our 5-year deficit plan is, though I am quite certain you had to answer those questions. But I think our rating was more about our ability to tax. And for me, as far as I'm concerned, I think this is more about being transparent to this community. If we can't project 5 years, great. We better be able to project 1, 2, 3 years out. And if we can't explain that to the community, then I think we've got more of a transparency issue than anything else. Thank you.
Is this on? I'm not sure. Okay, sorry. Just a couple points points. Presume if we hadn't done full-day kindergarten, the 5-year cost of the administration would be, is it roughly $1.2 million per year? So that's about $6 million. Facilities are about $7 million. I understand that he's saying that's not going to make it through the operating budget. That's more of a balance sheet item, but I presume at some point, if you're going to deplete your capital reserve fund and make that a pure balance sheet item, not run it through the operating budget, at some point, you're going to need to replenish that. It's really analogous to a condo where they have a huge reserve fund, they put on a new roof. At some point, you need to replenish that reserve fund. So it ultimately will flow through the income statement. So that deficit probably is going to be worse down the road than the $18 million. So I guess my point that I'd like to make clear, if this hadn't been done, and God knows what portion of that $7 million depletion of the reserve budget ultimately will flow through and increase that budget deficit, the cost of this full-day kindergarten, had it not been implemented, maybe the 5-year budget deficit might be $8 million, $10 million, I'm not sure, but I'm disappointed at the board that that wasn't discussed at all on the 128 meeting. Kelly, from my impression, made it pretty clear that the numbers were completely erroneous, that they shouldn't be relied on at all. Now tonight we're understanding they are to be relied on. So I don't quite get what's going on, and I'm not sure why, if those budget numbers were presented on December 20th, I believe, why at the January 28th meeting we were still debating whether they were accurate or not, and why nobody addressed that more clearly. So I'm very disappointed in the board, and I think you should, when you write your next piece to the public, clarify that what was shown as an $18 million budget deficit is accurate, and that, full-day kindergarten wasn't fully vetted in that $18 million budget deficit if there is some reasonable replenishment of the reserve fund.
I'm sorry, Mr. McGinn, can you take a moment and just sign in real quick?
Sure.
Okay, I apologize. We're a full 30 minutes over schedule. My apologies to Ms. Borowski and the Facilities Committee. I'm sorry if anybody else had more comment, but I really need to call it at this point. So this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for